I think I'm about 70% certain that I've actually got all of the books that I've acquired within the last month.
Non più tra I farfalloni amoroso, notte giorno di
Hi guys, my name is Kirsty. Welcome back to Upside Down Books and welcome to 2022. Not that this is the first film video thing for the year, but it is the first book haul of the year, and we're going to be looking at my biggest book haul of the year, which is the December book haul. Now, I'm still continuing with my trend of not doing book hauls like precisely on a monthly basis, so this is just everything since my last book haul, but it does include Christmas and everything I acquired in December, and I will tell you now that it is massive, so grab yourself a cup of tea and let's get into it. Primarily today we are going to be looking at books that I got for Christmas, a couple that I've bought myself, and like one review copy, but really not too many, so it is really just an onslaught of new books that I'm very, very excited about. Now, I can't remember what the last audiobook was that I talked about, so I'm going to talk about the two latest ones to land on my audiobook TBR. I feel like I've talked about this one, but one of them is the How to Train Your Dragon books 1 to 3, I think. And this, that's by Cressida Cowell. Not quite sure how to pronounce that one, but I love How to Train Your Dragon, and I really wanted to try listening to the audiobook of that one, so because it is narrated by David Tennant, and I love David Tennant, so we're going to see how that one goes. So if I have already hauled that one, then apologies. But the next book I want to talk about is the 4th installment in the Mortal Engines series, which is A Darkling Plane, and that's by Philip Reeve. Now this one I am not quite so excited to read because I didn't fall in love with book 3, and I kind of feel like this series peaked at book 2, but I do want to finish it. It's the last book in the series, so it'll be really satisfying to read this and finish off a series finally. I don't do that very often, but yeah, it is a really interesting dystopian sort of steampunk series, so if you haven't checked this one out yet, then I strongly recommend that you do, because at least the first book is brilliant. So those are the two books that I have to show you from my Audible sort of haul, and now let's dive in to the physical books. So as I've mentioned in my wrap-up video, and you've already seen some of these books, so excuse the double ups, but I have ordered sequels for the past year, and the first one I want to show you is the one and only book that has thus far come in, and that is The Last Graduate by Naomi Novik. This is the sequel to A Deadly Education. It's much thicker, which has me so excited, and I cannot wait to see where the story goes, because I actually thought that A Deadly Education might be a standalone novel. It could certainly have been left as a standalone novel because it's a very complete sort of story arc, but it does leave room for the story to be continued. So in the first book we have a magical school where there are no adults, there are no teachers, and it is sort of like a survival against magic that can take out students, and whoever actually makes it to graduation then has to go through this really big ordeal to graduate. I don't really want to get more specific than that, but it's epic. It's basically Hunger Games meets Hogwarts, which is very exciting. So yes, that's the first book for the haul. The next 4 I want to show you came from the Novelist box, which is an Australian subscription box, and once again you have already seen these if you've watched my wrap-up, but I want to talk about them again for those of you that have not. And the first one is Skin of the Sea by Natasha Bowen, and this is a Little Mermaid inspired YA fantasy that I'm really looking forward to. It was a very much so anticipated book for last year, being released at the very end of the year, and I'm hoping for great things. It's reasonably short and it has a stunning cover, so I have really high expectations for this, and I just feel like it's going to be so much fun, and I really like it when YA fantasy authors reimagine like the basics of fairy tales, whether it be The Little Mermaid or something else, and make it a little bit more dark and a little bit more mature. I find that to be really fun, so that's what I'm hoping for from this book. The next one is The Keeper of the Night by Kylie Lee Baker. This one is fantasy and Japanese inspiration, so it starts off with half British Reaper, half Japanese Shinigami, and it has a really long blurb that I am still yet to read. However, the first sentence does say that the main character is collecting souls in the streets of London, so I think this is going to be a dark, almost urban-like fantasy. I'm not sure, it says London, so I assume it's set in the real world, but I guess I will find out. I'm very excited to dive into this one, sort of your average length YA fantasy that I have seen all over the shelves in the bookstores, but I haven't had too much of yet, seeing it as a pretty new release, but I'm hoping, once again, for good things. The next book is a signed copy of The Marvelous Light by Freya Marske. This is a queer, I think, urban fantasy, so it's set in the real world, but there is magic involved, and so this is a signed copy. Let me show you. So I don't know if this is going to be standard practice in novelists that one of the books will be signed, but I think it's a really fun edition. This wasn't super high up on my list of things to get next, so I'm kind of excited that it's sort of jumps the queue by arriving through the novelist box, because it is still one I wanted to read, and I think it has a lovely cover, and I have heard some good things already about this one. So we have two guys in, I think, London again, I want to say. I bet it's not. Okay, I have no idea where it's set, but there is some sort of secret society and there is magic, so I am there for that. And the last book that came in the novelist box was the anniversary special edition of The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I am yet to read this. I have read Circe, but I'm really excited to read this. My mum's actually reading my other copy of this, as I do have a regular copy of it as well, and I feel like I'm honestly the last person on the planet to read this book at this point. But one of the main drawing points to getting the novelist box was knowing that this was going to be in there. It is just such a beautiful edition. So I haven't decided if I'm going to read from this edition or if I'm going to read from the other one yet, but yeah, this is just gorgeous. So very, very happy to have this on my bookshelf. The next two books are review copies, and I don't think I've shown you either of these ones yet. Definitely not this one. The first one is Lily Harford's A Last Request by Joanna Buckley. This was sent to me by Harlequin Australia, as the next one was as well. I've actually seen this one mentioned over the last few months, and I am actually quite excited for it. I feel like I'm not the target audience. It's clearly going to have a more mature main character, but nonetheless I'm quite excited. So the main character in this one is sliding into dementia, and I believe the main premise is that she's going to try and get her last wish granted by convincing someone to basically end her life, as that is her last wish, is to not progress into dementia. So I don't know if this is going to be sad or funny. It doesn't sound like it's going to be funny, but I could see how it could be an entertaining read potentially, of trying to convince someone to do something illegal as your last wish. But I think it's probably going to be more along the sad and poignant line of dealing with dementia as the main character in your own life, and how you want your life to end and whether you want to go through that experience. So this could be quite sad. It's quite a short book. This is an unfinished copy, however, so it might be a bit bigger when you see it on the shelves. They tend to be, so I'm very curious to see how that one goes. And for January's Book of the Month pick, which I am hoping to read obviously in January, so very soon, is Murder Most Fancy by Kelly McCourt. I think this looks stunning and beautiful. There's so many colours. I'm actually quite excited to read it. I'm hoping for a few laughs out of this one. It's giving me Dial A for Auntie vibes, but I'm not quite sure what to expect. The tagline on this one is that she didn't really mean to become a detective, so I get the understanding that we're going to have a main character who is thrust into a murder mystery sort of by accident, and getting involved in things that she didn't need to or wasn't intending to get involved with. So I'm really curious to see where this one will take me. Now the next book is one that I bought for myself. It is one that I did break my buying ban for, but every year just before Christmas I always visit this bookstore, this independent bookstore in Perth that I really love, and I usually pick out a special edition of a book to add to my shelves. I have done this for I think about 5 or 6 years now, and I have got some really beautiful editions of books. Started doing it because we go to some Christmas carols that are on the same street as the bookstore, and I over time realised that they have really lovely editions of books. So the one that I got this year is 1984 by George Orwell. This is a Penguin Harvel Seeker edition, so that's the imprint. I think this might be done by the same people who did my edition of The Night Manager. Let me show you that. Okay, no, this is my edition of The Night Manager, and it is just straight up Penguin Classics, but it does match in style and size to 1984, so I got that from the same bookstore as well. So when I saw this I thought, oh, I've got to have it, because I actually really like these covers. I know it's a bit of a icky colour in some ways, but I don't actually own 1984. My parents do, but I don't, so this is now my edition of it, and I hope that I get around to reading it one day, though it's not particularly high on my priority list. So before we dive into the actual Christmas book haul, I have another set of books to show you which I won in a giveaway, and that is the complete set of the new covers of the Divergent trilogy, so for Divergent, Insurgent and Allegiance. I wasn't sure how I felt about these covers, but I won a giveaway that the book grocer was running on Instagram, and seeing them in person, I'm not usually a fan of step backs, which is what these things are called, but I actually really like it because of the stylistic choices they did with these particular editions. So this felt like such a big upgrade to get the whole series. Massive thank you to the book grocer for running that giveaway, because it's so exciting to win an entire series and a new classic at that. I'm probably due a reread of these at some point, but yeah, I didn't love how this series ended, so I don't know if I could put myself through the trauma of that again, but I'm nonetheless thrilled to have them on my shelf. I have 2 sequels to show you that I got on my Kindle, so let's do those next as well. So this is my Kindle, and when I was ordering all the sequels for this year, there were a few I wasn't able to get because they were way too expensive or just not available, but I did get a couple on my Kindle, and I do want to do more reading on my Kindle this year. So let me show you what I got. First book that I got, I kind of wanted to show you, these aren't, I was going to show you the covers on the actual Kindle, but they don't come up very well. So the first one I got is Shadowplay by Aurora Lamb, I can't remember, and it is the sequel in the second book in the Mika Grey series. The first one was called Pantomime, and it is about a transgender character and they are running away to the circus, and that sort of sums up a lot of the plotline there, and they're dealing with lots of prejudice and issues because it is set in the yesteryear, so it is not during an accepting time at all. I have been umming and ahhing over whether I was going to continue this series because I did enjoy book one, but it hasn't really stuck with me lots, and it's been really hard to get my hands on a copy of the sequel, but now I've got it on my Kindle, so I will see if the second book continues to be awesome or if it's sort of was best left at book one. We will see. And the other book that I got was Rebel Angels by Lilac Girls. I read beautiful, I can't remember what the first one's called. The first one to this book, I read that years and years and years and years and years ago, and I got it from the library, which is probably why I never then followed up with the rest of the series. This has just sort of fallen into a void for so many years, so I'm glad that I finally got my hands on a copy of the sequel on my Kindle. It's actually quite hard to get your hands on any of these books in this series anymore, certainly within Australia in any case. They seem to be nearly out of print or something, but yeah, I really loved book one, so I am actually so excited to pick this up at some point, and I hope that I can remember the story, but we will see. So, let's dive into the Christmas book haul. I received somewhere around 20 books for Christmas. It was enormous. We've already hauled a lot, so let's crack on into it. The first one is Defy the Night by Bridget Kemmerer. I'm very excited about this one because of the one singular book I've actually read of Bridget Kemmerer. I love her writing, and I have every intention of reading all of her books. It's just getting around to them. This is her newest YA fantasy, so thank you to my sister for getting me a copy of this one. I think in this one the characters are outlaws marked for death, so there's going to be all sorts of things going on there. And it's set in a kingdom where sickness crawls the streets and only the richest can afford the cure, so I think that's going to be very interesting to read, particularly in our pandemic times as it is. The next book to show you is Letters from Berlin by Tanya Blanchard. Both my mum and I have been really getting into Tanya Blanchard's writing lately. I recently read Echoes of War and really enjoyed it. It's sort of very soft and easygoing historical fiction, and I've also got The Girl from Munich, which is one of her other books, so I'm really excited to dive into Letters from Berlin because I think it's going to be great, and I really like the settings that Tanya Blanchard uses to set her stories and write about. I think all of them are set during World War II, so I assume this will be another family saga, romance, independent, strong female character, but this time in Germany, so I'm really looking forward to that. The next book is Aurora Rising by Lauren James. This one has such a gorgeous cover. I love the gold foiling on this one. And this one is a climate change disaster dystopian, so this is front and center about climate change, and I really want to read more dystopians that use climate change as a setting. I think it is a great idea and a very scary way of writing because it's just a little bit too close to home sometimes. And the main plotline in this is that there are teenagers starting this new way of battling climate change where they are growing plants from their skin. So I'm so intrigued as to where this one is going to go with the story, but I can't wait to dive into it. It's not a very big one, so I should be able to get through this reasonably quickly when I do pick it up. The next book is one that's been on my wishlist for a really long time, so it was very surreal to actually see it in person, and that is The Paris Architect by Charles Belfour. This one has such an intriguing cover with only a slim line of an image, and it is historical fiction. I will tell you now that this book haul is going to be very heavy on historical fiction, which is amazing. So this one is set in 1942 in Paris, so during World War II, and the main character in this is commissioned for a very wealthy project to design a hiding place for a Jewish man. So I'm quite excited to dive into this one. I've just been wanting to read this for many years, so I'm thrilled to have it in my hands. The next one is one that I have been wanting to read for the last 5 years, I think exactly, or five, yeah, around about there, and that is The Lilac Girls by Martha Hall Kelly. Now this one I remember, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this came out the same time as Kristen Hanna's The Nightingale, and I remember being in the airport around the time it came out, and I was about to get onto a flight, and I was trying to pick a book I needed to read, and I was choosing between this and The Nightingale, and back then I chose The Nightingale, and have been wanting to get my hands on Lilac Girls ever since, because I didn't know of any reviews at that point, and I've just heard nothing but good things since then. So again, this is more World War II fiction. This one is set in New York, and it is obviously following some women. Oh, okay, so the interesting thing of this one is it's actually following a New York socialite who championed a group of concentration camp survivors known as the Rabbits. So I think this is going to be quite a sad and powerful story, but I'm really curious to see what the story is going to explore there. It's quite a thick one for its size, so I'm really excited to get lost within its pages. It should be, I think this might make me cry, but we will see. It's becoming unsafe but it's okay for now. The next book that I have to show you I'm very excited about, and I'm so thrilled that someone picked this off my wish list, and that is The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This one, everyone sees this, looks at it and reads it and says it sounds a lot like the Squid Game. I have not watched Squid Game, that's really not my thing, but I could definitely go in for reading something similar. So we have, I think one of the main characters inherits a lot of money, and then there's a lot of barriers in the way of her getting that in terms of challenges that might end her life. Yes, so the premise is that the main character inherits this mansion, everything in it, but she's caught in a deadly game that everyone in this strange family is playing, and it's all like how far will they go to keep their fortune, and that only one person can win and one person will take it all. So I love that there's question marks on all the faces here, and I think this has been quite well received, so I think I will enjoy reading this. The next book is one I was so excited to receive because I've had my eye on this since it was released 1 or 2 years ago, and that is The Brilliant Death by Amy Rose Capetta. Love, love, love the cover for this one, and I think this is sort of Italian fantasy from my understanding. Whoa, look how stunning this map is. Yes, I remember being very excited because it was using Italian inspiration, definitely Italian, to create this sort of, I want to say like mafia fantasy. Someone's got powers, we've got rulers, someone is poisoning the patriarchs of the country, 5 controlling families. Oh, that's right, and the main character, in order to save her family, only boys can go into whatever it is that they have to do to protect their family, win a fortune, something like that. She actually has to transform into a boy, not just go disguised as one, and I think it was that point that had me very, very excited. So I don't know in what way she's going to transform, but I think it'll be really interesting. And I so hope this is as good as I want it to be. The next book is one that I've just heard endless good things about, and that is The Kinder Poison by Natalie May. I actually don't know what this is about, I just know it's really, really good. Oh, we've got someone who's able to commune with animals in a kingdom where there are royals and there is magic, and someone invokes some sort of event. A death-defying race across the desert. The first the heirs to visit. Ascending to the throne. Sold. So we've got like high stakes, a race, a desert, and whoever wins gets to go to the throne. So I'm sold. I can't believe I've never really read the blurb before. I've just heard literally endless good things, so can't wait to pick this one up. The next one is one I'm hoping to start really, really soon, and that is Anything But Fine by Toonie Bees. And that's Anything But Fine by Tobias Madden. This was actually a book club pick of the month for one of my local book clubs I was a part of, but I didn't participate that month. And it looks like I'm going to in a belated fashion. So this one is obviously a queer YA contemporary. I think the main character does ballet and has a Australian ballet school, but he breaks his foot, so dreams are crushed. There is a bookmark in here. Oh, I put that bookmark in there. And yeah, so I've heard loads and loads of good things. I think this was a lot of people's, like in their top 5 for last year, for those that actually read it. So I hope that I love this one just as much. I think it's going to be beautiful and funny. Next book is one I have started, and I'm about 50 pages in, and that is A Dead End Job by Justin Akala. This one was so hard to get a hold of. I've heard it was a Christmas present. You will have seen me talk about this one as well, and it's all about Death, who is so exhausted and run down, and he needs a vacation from his job, so he's trying to hire an intern, and so far it is very funny. So many more books. We are nowhere near done yet. Now the next book I have to show you is Bone Crier's Moon by Catherine Purdy. This one I chose myself with a voucher I was given from family, and I love the cover, which is mainly why I chose this one over all the others that I'm wanting to read. It is YA fantasy, and I believe it is people with a sacred duty to ferry the spirits of the dead to the afterlife, and I've heard lots of good things, so that was what propelled me to pick this one up. The next one is probably one of my most anticipated books that came out last year, and I'm so excited to have it in my hands, and that's Fiona McIntosh's new book, The Spy's Wife. We all know that I've got a recent obsession with Fiona McIntosh. Every book of hers I've read I've just loved. I've just absolutely fallen in love with the setting and the characters, so I am hoping for equally good things. We have another World War II fiction, and this time set in Germany, and obviously it's going to be about a female spy, I assume. Even though it does say the spy's wife, I feel like the female's going to be the spy, so I can't wait to start this one. The next one is one, once again, I'm just excited to have these all in my hands, but I've seen so many people reading this one and I've had such FOMO, but now I've got my own copy, and that is Dark Rise by C.S. Pacat, and I've not read anything by this author before, but I really want to. I like the look of all of their books. I love how thick and chunky this one is, so I think this is going to be a great YA fantasy to sink my teeth into. This one starts with the ancient world of magic is no more, so heroes are dead, the halls are in ruins, and great battles between light and dark are forgotten. Only the stewards remember. So this sounds like it's going to have some darker themes and probably a mission to find magic once more. The next book is one that I actually hadn't heard of prior to getting it, but I love the look of it and I'm quite excited to see what it's all about. And that's The Eighth Wonder by Tanya Farrelly. This one is set in America, I think in New York, and it's following some suffragettes around the time when that was all happening, so the early 20th century. And it also has elements of the circus within it because of characters who are involved. So I'm really looking forward to diving into this one. I actually haven't read much historical fiction centered around the suffragette movement, so I'm really excited to do that because it is such an interesting and important part of history, especially for me being a woman. If you don't know who the suffragettes were, they were the women who fought to get equal rights in terms of voting for women during that era, and it is a very brave and interesting history to read about because of what they had to do to get heard. The next book is a book that's quite recently come into my radar, and that is Daughters of War by Dinah Jeffries. This is set in France in 1944, so once again World War II fiction. It is gloriously big and has such a soothing looking cover, so I assume we're going to be in the French countryside. I believe we are following 3 characters in this time, and we are looking at allies coming to ask for help from these women. I actually don't really want to know much more about this, I just want to dive into it and enjoy, and I hope that this is going to sit somewhere between a Fiona McIntosh and a Kristen Hanna style of writing. Now interestingly, the next book I want to show you is probably one of the lowest rated books out of all of these on Goodreads, but the one I am probably the most excited for, and that's The Zookeeper of Belfast by S.K. Walsh. I'm hoping the low rating on Goodreads is purely from not that many people having read it yet, but this one is obviously going to be about a zookeeper in Belfast, which is in Ireland during World War II, and I love the idea of that story, particularly because it's similar to other famous historical fiction movies that have been done about zookeepers. Zookeeper's Wife, I think, is the main film that I'm thinking of. So this is set in 1941 with the first female zookeeper in Belfast, and she is in charge of Violet, who is an Indian elephant. And so I think this is just going to be a story about her trying to keep Violet safe when the bombs start coming down on Belfast, so I can't wait to see what's in this book. The next book I have to show you is pretty exciting, and that is Aurora Rising by Jay Kristoff. One of my friends managed to get me this, but not only did they get me this, they got me one that had a signed book plate, so I think this came in one of the subscription boxes. So I now have 2 books signed by Jay Kristoff, which is very exciting. Obviously this is signed by Amy Kaufman as well. I don't think I need to say anything about this. Incredibly popular YA sci-fi that absolutely everyone is turning their knickers inside out for. They're just so excited. So I'm just really looking forward to see if I like it as much. I think I will. Okay, we are nearly there. We are getting there, I promise. So the third last book I have to show you is The Last Bookshop in London by Madeline Martin. I think this one seems reasonably self-explanatory. This one is in 1939 in London, and it is about people preparing for Hitler's war to sweep across Europe, and we have, I think, just someone who is in charge of a bookstore in London. It's about the power of storytelling during dark times. I have really been looking forward to reading this book. It has been on my wish list for quite a few years. So once again, another book I'm very excited to actually have in my hands finally. The last 2 books are actually non-fiction, and they are following on the climate change and sort of interest in those topics that I've recently found myself intrigued by, and the first one is Extreme Conservation by Joel Berger. So this one is subtitled Life at the Edges of the World, so I assume this is going to be about life for animals living at the extreme climates and how climate change is impacting them, as they are basically at the frontier of climate change. I'm really excited to read these books and to share what I find with you. If you missed my 2022 goals, that I did mention at one point, I wanted to start a new series here on this channel called Learn With Me, where I'm going to be reading and picking out books like this and telling you a summation and reviewing them basically for you, and recommending whether they're worth reading or not, so that you can come on this journey of learning more about climate change from the experts in the field who are actually researching it. So this is something I'm really hoping to have read quite a few of by the time we get to this time next year. And so in the same vein as that, this beautiful book came from my brother, and it is huge, and that is A Perfect Planet. It's a BBC book, and I've already started having a flip through this one. It is filled with pictures and it is absolutely gorgeous. So this is another reference book for me to have a flip through and learn about. This one so far seems to be a lot of information about how climates work and what all the different animals are doing, very much so like a David Attenborough, but in a information book like this. So this is another book that I'm very excited to be picking up. So on that note, that brings me to the end of this book haul, which is absolutely enormous, and you can see about half the books back here. I was thrilled to receive all the books that I did, so massive thank you to everyone who gave me a book for Christmas and contributed to this epic haul. I can't wait to read all of them. I'm really glad I'm doing a TBR for a month in January so that I can get a start on some of these and actually read some of these before I get into the rest of the year. I just think I have some great reads ahead of me for 2022, and I can't wait to see what I think of all the books. So let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of these, if you're planning to read any of these, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye.
Alla gloria militar